Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So we're going to talk about podcasts, but I want to talk about something that far, far predates podcasts first, which is the media of audio. And I come to you today first with a confession, which is that I'm obsessed by the medium of audio, and I have been since I was a little kid. So this is me. I used to be a radio producer, far younger, but even before this, I grew up listening to the radio, and I lived in one town, and I went to school in another town in the Boston area in Massachusetts. And I would listen to National Public Radio, to the news in the backseat of my parents' car every day on the way to school. And I would listen, Boston's a big sports town, so I would listen to baseball games. And I didn't like to watch the baseball games. I didn't even go to the baseball games. I would listen on the radio because I found that when the announcers were describing what was happening on the field and telling the story of the game, I could imagine it in my own head. I could smell the grass, and I could see the players running around the bases. And I even had a clock radio that would sit on side of my bedside table so that I could go to sleep with a DJ voice rolling into my ear, so I'd have someone to keep me company. And so I ran my college radio station. I got into a career in audio. And then about 5 years ago, I started listening to podcasts. And I started having the same experience with podcasts that I had as a kid through linear radio and discovering all these new kinds of shows, these new formats. And the insight I had was that this was a new medium that was being born. And every time a new medium gets born, new media companies get built. And I started telling everyone I knew this fact. I was like, someone's going to build a media company that defines on-demand audio, storytelling audio, and I want to do that. And I told enough people this that finally someone said, oh, you got to meet this other guy because he's saying the same thing. And that other guy became my co-founder, Alex Bloomberg. And at Gimlet, we're storytellers. So the first thing that we did was we decided to tell our own story. And it was captured in this show, this documentary called Startup. So when we first started, we would record everything we would do. When we would go pitch investors, we would record the investor pitches. Most of the time you pitch investors, it doesn't work. They don't give you money. We took those really tough conversations and we put them in this documentary. We recorded our equity negotiation over what percentage each of us was going to own of the company, which is a really intense, raw conversation. We put that in the documentary in Startup. And we didn't know how people were going to react to showing this thing publicly, and the audience loved it. And within a few months, we had hundreds of thousands of people following us in real time as we built the company. Because it turns out that starting any kind of new project, any new creative project, whether it's a business or something else, as you guys know, it's very dramatic. It's high stakes, there's interesting characters, surprises happen, it's challenging, it's joyful, and that's the story of Startup. And when Startup began to resonate, it solidified this belief that I have and that we have at Gimlet, which is that we are right now at the dawn of the second golden age of audio. Now, the first golden age of audio was 100 years ago, and it was radio. So if I bring you back 100 years ago, you would see families sitting in their living room staring at a box, a radio, and listening to news and entertainment and live music. And this was a time when radio was minting celebrities and stars. So Orson Welles came out of the radio, went on to become big television and film impresario. The biggest media companies of the 20th century started out of radio, so CBS, NBC. And then something happened, which is television came along. And when television came along, all of a sudden, audio froze. Like, over the last 80 years, there really has not been that much innovation in terms of creativity, in terms of formats, even in business models in audio, until now. And so Gimlet came along, and we realized that we are at this second golden age of audio, and we could build a new business, a new way of storytelling, and a new way of doing advertising with marketers that I'm going to talk about for on-demand audio. And at Gimlet, we've launched now since we started the company 4.5, 5 years ago. We've launched about 15 owned and operated editorial shows, and they go across categories. So these are some of the shows we make. I'll just call out a couple. We make Reply All, which is one of the biggest tech podcasts on earth. Do any of you listen to Reply All? Yeah, maybe a couple. Okay. We make a show called Science Versus, which applies the lens of science to sort of controversial and faddish topics in the world. So you can listen to the Science Versus episode on the 7-minute workout, and it will tell you whether that will actually make you healthy or not. And we've gotten into entertainment, so pure entertainment. So we do fiction. Homecoming, which was our first scripted series, is a story about a government conspiracy. It's a thriller. And we almost did like radio drama, like the way radio drama happened 100 years ago, except for modern and fresh, with great actors and talent. And it almost feels like television for your ears when you're listening to Homecoming. So these are some of these shows. What unites them is quality. So they're across all kinds of categories, right? Business, tech, science, culture, history, children's. But what unites them is that they're all highly edited, they're curated, produced. There's a richness of a sound design. And so they feel different, and they feel like a higher level of quality that you may be used to encountering if you go into podcasts and see the other 500,000 user-generated shows. So Gimlet, our business has 3 parts. And the first part of Gimlet is our owned and operated shows like the ones I described. We also have Gimlet Pictures, which is our IP division that takes our shows and develops them for TV and film. And we have Gimlet Creative, which is an audio agency, which helps brands find their voice in audio. And we make a lot of audio. So we've launched 39 shows over the last 4 years and counting. We've had 9 billion minutes of Gimlet audio content listened to. And we've worked with over 100 brand partners to date on campaigns, on original podcasts. And we just built 13 new studios. So we just moved into our new offices in Brooklyn, New York, where we have 13 studios. It's the largest podcast production facility on earth. But for us, it is really not about quantity as much as it is quality. So how do we judge quality? Well, we're an editorial organization, so quality is judged by what we're excited about. It's judged by how our listeners respond and whether we win prizes and get critical acclaim. We win a lot of prizes and get a lot of critical acclaim, so I have to show this slide. But I want to say a few things about what makes for a successful podcast. We've tried a lot of things and learned sort of why people listen to podcasts, and we think there are 3 main reasons. Okay, and reason 1 is they listen to be told a story and to be entertained. Okay, so Homecoming, our scripted series, involves characters who are in a facility that doesn't quite feel like it's really what it looks like. And there's a mystery at the center of Homecoming, which is soldiers have come back from war, they're stuck in a facility, and they don't really know why or what's going on. And the series begins to unravel the mystery. It's a great story, and you can get lost in it in an immersive way. The second reason we think people listen to podcasts is to learn something new. So Science Versus, every episode you'll learn something new. The thing I learned last week is the placebo effect, which is when you're doing medical research and you're giving some research patients real medicine and some research patients fake medicine. The fake medicine makes them feel better, even if you tell them it's fake. Even if you tell them it's a placebo, you still get the placebo effect. That's something I learned from Science Versus, one of our biggest shows. And the third reason we think listeners love podcasts, and I think this is the most powerful thing, and it's the reason I've always loved the medium of audio, is companionship. It's a sense that when you're listening to the hosts of your favorite show, you're hanging out with them. So our biggest show is Reply All. And it centers around these 2 people, PJ and Alex, who go into weird and surprising corners of the internet that you probably don't even know exist. they do investigations and reporting, and then they bring back their story, and they tell their story to their co-host. And when you're listening to it, you almost feel like the third one of their friends. So if I'm on a commute to work and I'm listening, I feel like they're like there in the passenger seat of my car with me. And they're almost like aspirational best friends. So when we're developing new shows, these are the three things we look at, and every new show has to hit on at least two of them, and the biggest hits hit on all three. What we found is that because our audio content is story-based, our IP can travel to other media. So Homecoming has now become a hit television series on Amazon, starring Julia Roberts. It was a Golden Globe Award nominee, and we're in production right now on season 2. We're developing a number of our other podcasts for film and television as well. The Horror of Dolores Roach is a really nasty horror story. Became a hit podcast for us. We're now developing it for TV with Blumhouse, the folks behind Get Out, and a number of other shows as well. So I want to talk, we are at a marketing conference after all, so I want to talk about advertising and marketing because I think audio is an amazing medium for brand advertising. And if you look at who we're reaching right now, our audience, our name for them is, we call them the unreachables, because they're very hard to reach. So our audience watches a lot of television, but they're mostly watching on Netflix and Amazon. 90% of our audience has streamed a Netflix show in the last month. They're not seeing advertisements there. Their median age of 31 years old, they're on the internet all day long, but 70% of them are using an ad blocker because they don't want to see ads there. And we're reaching them with a native ad product that is midstream, typically read by the host of the show, by your aspirational best friend. And our listeners actually tell us they like the ads because they feel like additive to the programming, and they feel like they're part of the show they're listening to. And so we set up an audio agency, Gimlet CREATIVE, which helps brands find their voice in audio. And we've worked with many brands to create original podcasts, like some of these. We've worked with Nike on the Phenom Effect, with Tinder on DTR, which is a dating show, with Lyft on a show called Pick Me Up that's aimed at Lyft drivers to help them make their lives better. But I want to make a broader observation about advertising, because if you look at the top Fortune 100 brands, they all have visual style guides. They have a clear perspective on what the colors of their brand are, on what their logo looks like. They may have a custom font or typeface. They have a very clear visual identity, right? So if I show you this, these colors, these shapes, you immediately know this is MasterCard. If I show you this, unmistakable, it's Coca-Cola. In fact, this color red is so associated with Coca-Cola that it has a name, which is Coke Red. And so as audio becomes a bigger part of consumers' day, and they're spending 2.5 hours every day where people can't be in front of screens, but they can be consuming audio, right? It's when you're commuting and you're cooking or you're working out. As audio becomes a bigger part of people's day, brands have to ask this question of themselves, which is, what should a brand sound like? We know what many of these brands look like, but brands should be really asking this question, does your brand have a voice? Because if it doesn't, in this world of audio, your brand is going to be muted. And so Gimlet CREATIVE, which is our audio agency, helps brands do this. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about a couple projects we've done. We work with Adobe to help them elevate the voice of their brand through audio. So Adobe is a brand that gives everyone everything they need to design and deliver exceptional digital experiences. So our question was, how does that sound? And in this case, we were targeting an audience of designers. And what we wanted to do is we didn't want to tell these designers how to use the product. We wanted to help them envision what they could do with Adobe products. And so this is a show. It's a multi-episode interview series. And we cast a host who was himself a designer. Khoi Vinh, who's the principal designer at Adobe, hosted this show. And it has a very inquisitive tone. And the way it sounds, if you listen to branded content or you listen to audio advertisements, typically the music that you hear will be very upbeat and energy and happy. That wasn't appropriate for this show, so we composed original music, and it's quite sparse, it's whimsical, and it supports the tone of the show. And this show, we really felt, and Adobe did too, captured the voice of the brand in audio. Procter & Gamble came to us with a very different problem to solve. And their problem was, they looked at their oral care division, so Crest toothpaste and Oral-B toothbrushes, and they said, we have a problem, which is kids hate brushing their teeth. I don't know if you all have experienced this, if there are parents in the audience. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. They hate brushing their teeth. It becomes a battle every morning and every night to get them to do it. And so Procter & Gamble asked, is there a way to solve that problem through audio? In parallel, we have all of these new audio devices that are all around us pervasively in the form of Amazon Alexa, Echoes, Google Homes, speakers and microphones in places where they didn't used to be in our home. And so we developed a custom skill that lives across Alexa and Google Home, and it delivers 2 minutes of audio content every morning and every evening for kids to listen to while they brush their teeth. It's called Chompers. So if you have an Alexa, you can go home tonight and have your kids say, Alexa, start Chompers, or just Alexa, let's brush our teeth. And they'll get 2 minutes of games, quizzes, music, which is exactly the length of time they should spend brushing their teeth. And what we found after this, after Chompers, is that we surveyed. This show has been a huge success. It's been downloaded over 8 million times. The episodes have been downloaded 8 million times. And when we asked the parents what effect Chompers had, before they used Chompers, only 6% of them said that it was easy or very easy to get their kids to brush their teeth. After their kids started using Chompers, 67% of them said it became easy or very easy to get their kids to brush their teeth. Oh, by the way, that means they're using more toothpaste, so P&G is happy. And we've done this kind of work, audio strategy across original podcasts, audio advertising, with a number of other brand partners, some of whom are here. And so Gimlet was going along, and things were going well, but there were two big challenges that our company was facing, but that really the whole industry was facing. One was we weren't getting enough data back from our listeners so we could incorporate that into our editorial process or our marketing and promotions. We didn't have enough data because most of our shows are distributed via RSS. So we don't know exactly what's happening on the other end. And two is, discovery is a real challenge in podcasts. So there are a lot of people who still don't listen to podcasts. Some of them are in this audience. I feel bad for you, because there's amazing creativity going on in the medium. And when we ask people who don't listen to podcasts why, the biggest reason they give is, well, there's no show for me, or I don't know how to find a show I would like. And so then in February, this happened, which is Spotify, as Philip mentioned, Spotify acquired our company, Gimlet Media, just a few months ago. And the reason that we've now joined forces with Spotify is because together with the largest global music listening platform, we believe we'll be able to solve some fundamental issues that are going to help this industry grow dramatically and let more people listen to podcasts. Because now we're able to incorporate data on an aggregated basis that'll help inform our programming and creative decisions. And we're going to solve discovery, we believe, based on how much success Spotify has had in cracking discovery in music. And I'm really happy to be here in Germany, in Hamburg with you today, because our belief is that the German market actually is like a little peephole that we can look through to see the future of what the rest of the world is going to look like. We think the German market is actually quite far along in this transition. So Spotify is the #1 listening platform for podcasts in Germany. About 46% of listeners who are listening to podcasts in Germany are listening on Spotify. This makes me happy. We have the biggest podcast in Germany, Fest und Flauschig. Do any of you listen to Fest und Flauschig? Okay, yes, tons of hands are raising now. And we've launched 6 other originals since last year as well. We just announced this morning, by the way, that Fest und Flauschig has renewed for 3 more years with Spotify. So there's lots more Fest und Flauschig that's going to be coming over the next 3 years. That's news today. Yes. Yes. And what this means amongst Spotify's other originals is that there is plenty of opportunity for brands to begin to find their voice and incorporate their marketing and advertising strategy in German Spotify originals. And so there are some Spotify folks around here, and we'd love to talk to you about that. Finally, I have one announcement to make today, which is that for the first time ever, Gimlet is launching an international podcast, and we're starting in the German market. So we're going to be developing Sandra, which is a scripted show that was a big hit in the U.S. market. So it's fiction, and it's about a world where artificial intelligence all of a sudden becomes not so artificial anymore. The first season starred Ethan Hawke and Kristen Wiig in the US, and we're going to be developing this show for the German market with German actors, a German director, and German language. And we are really excited to show the world what a Gimlet podcast can sound like in German, so look out for that coming soon. And thank you.
Don't ask.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's Howard.
Those sneakers are amazing.
Yeah,
I feel like I should brought my sunglasses.
The whole sneaker game,
I
right?
need my sunglasses to.
A couple questions.
Yes.
First question before we open the bar for questions. How about chefs? I mean, we have Tim here. He's the German version of Jamie Oliver. He's like a huge chef. Why don't chefs?
I think he doesn't agree with that.
Paul! Ja, und da ist noch jemand, ein Mega-Podcaster. There's another one. He's like...
Yeah, but he doesn't want to be compared to Jamie Oliver. He's, right?
Yeah,
right?
Tim, is it okay? Paul, hier, Sneaker Game. Ja, ich zieh mich gleich wieder um. Bist besser, ne? Okay, anyways,
we think food can be a big... We think food can be a huge category in podcasts. Yeah. We haven't figured it out yet. I don't speak German, so I didn't get to hear the whole conversation that happened before I came on.
But it's a true point. I mean, he's like a celebrity chef.
Yes.
And
he's obviously incredibly good talker because he had the whole audience wrapped.
Yeah, true.
Yes.
So what's the perspective for that? Do you think there's money to make in that field?
In food?
Yeah.
Yes. I think food is a point of passion and identity for many people. It's how we relate to other people, and I think the challenge, of course, in the medium of audio is you can't see the food. And so it becomes much more about storytelling and personality, and now I want to listen to Tim's podcast.
It's in German, though. It's in German. I mean, we have a couple podcasters now at the bar. There's Michael, who has his own podcast. There's Tim, and there's just joined Paul, who does RWFNR with Paul and Joko. So there's probably tons of questions from these guys.
Yes.
Do you have questions? Or Sylvie, maybe, or Josephine, or Katharina?
I have a
when is the first Warsteiner podcast coming?
Yeah, I wanted to know, how do you make brands audible? Could you give us an example?
How do we make brands
audible? How do you do it?
How do we make brands audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, I gave a couple examples here, but we have a creative team that will sit down with a brand and first understand what problem they're trying to solve and who they're trying to reach. And then often it starts with, who is the voice we want to represent you, and what should they feel and sound like? So it'll involve casting a host. It'll involve structuring a show or stories. Or in the case of advertising, it'll be, what do we want the voice of the brand to be? Do we want it to be earnest and uplifting? Do we want it to be, more detached and sardonic? And we'll cast all of the voice, the writing, the music around the sort of feel that the brand is trying to achieve.
So the Chanel podcast would be about fashion, obviously, I guess. Yes. And who would be the voice to this? I mean, Carl doesn't live anymore, so...
Yes. Are you with Chanel?
No, I'm not. Oh, I'm with a brewery.
Yes. Well, we work with Chanel. Chanel is one of our clients. And with them, actually, a lot of the conversation was around the idea that Chanel is an emotional, aspirational brand. If you look at something like Chanel's perfumes, their scents, it relates very strongly to memory. So with them, the conversation became a lot about how do we evoke people's memory through audio and through sound, which is another medium that just evokes memory. And they're a great brand because they have super high exacting standards for how their creative should look and feel and sound. And so it's been exciting to adapt that for this new medium with them. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. Just a short question on the target group, because as you said, people listening to podcasts are getting, the numbers are getting higher and higher, but also at the same time, I think people watching moving images, content on YouTube and so on, the numbers are also rising. So do you think these are the same people, or do you treat your target group differently, or do you think that people use just content on different channels to a different time of the day, or do you think people listening to podcasts are a special target group?
I don't think today podcast listeners tend to be, at least in our market, younger, more educated, and more affluent. But I believe podcast has now hit the inflection point of becoming a mass medium. So no, I don't think podcast listeners are different than people who watch television or consume other media. What I do think is there are different times of the day when you can be listening, when you can't be watching. And so I mentioned, this was one of the things when we first started the company, we started looking at how do people spend their time. And people spend 2.5 hours every day doing things where they can't be looking at a screen. And so, as I said, it's commuting, it's working out, it's cooking, it's doing chores. In fact, when we first designed our initial shows, we designed around those use cases. So all of our shows, typically the episodes will be 20 to 40 minutes long, because the average length of a commute is 20 to 40 minutes, and the average length of a workout is 20 to 40 minutes. And so we designed against those. Those are times where you can't be watching. I'd say the other thing is, if you look at the cycle of people's day, our belief is that you want to hit them in the morning when they're listening to news or where they're on their morning commute. You may want to hit them in the afternoon as they're winding down, and before bed we of course have chompers as you're brushing their teeth. And adding audio into the marketing mix, we believe can make a big difference in people's perception and retention for a brand. Yes?
Michael?
Can you give us the perspective of the size of advertising on podcasts? How big is this really?
Yeah. So in the U.S. market, podcast advertising is probably this year going to be between $500 million and $750 million. Actually, pretty small. Pretty small compared to how much time people spend listening. So radio in our market is $18 billion. That seems wrong to me. So we think over time radio is going to come down and podcast is going to increase, and that's what we've seen. We've seen revenues grow 30 to 50% industry-wide or more in recent years. Yeah.
One question that I have with Paul a couple of times, and probably Tim is going to come up with the same question at some point, is how much money are the most famous, most successful American podcasters make? What do you think? Like year income for Joe Rogan, maybe for Bill Simmons, what are they making a year?
I think there are dozens of podcasters who are making millions of dollars per year hosting their show. If they have a scaled audience and they're releasing content at higher frequency on a twice weekly or weekly cadence. And then there are some shows that are doing 8 figures, that are doing $10 million or more, the biggest shows that are coming out regularly.
So you would think that the ceiling right now is 10 million a year? That's the most you can get? It's probably the New York Times, right?
I don't know. I have no insight on their finances, but my sense is that that's sort of where the top players are now. Yes.
So for single hosts like a Joe Rogan, what do you think? There's a lot of speculation on the web.
You're obsessed with it.
It's my business.
I don't know. I mean, I think, look, he has an audience of millions of people listening to his show multiple times a week, and they're captive, and they have a trusted relationship with him, and he's the one reading the ads. So I think that drives real revenue. I genuinely don't don't know what the number is. But we also believe we're just at the beginning, as I said, just at the dawn of this second golden age of audio. And from a business perspective, today it's an advertising business, but we believe there are going to be other forms of scaled revenue, including subscriptions and others. To unlock the true value of audio, we think there's going to need to be multiple revenue streams.
And last question from my side. Does it make sense to work in seasons? I always have the feeling as a producer or as a podcast host that you have to be out there weekly, bi-weekly, but you can't have breaks. Do you have breaks with your shows?
Some of our shows come out every single week, and then some of them are seasonal. So if we're doing a fiction show like Homecoming, or we're not able to produce it every week. It'll be 10 episodes, then it'll come back for a second season, maybe 6 months, a year later. We try to bias heavily towards shows that come out on a regular basis. But if we're doing documentary work, or we're doing very high-end, prestige, scripted, it's just from a production standpoint not possible to get it out every week, which means that you have to achieve a higher audience in order to make the economics attractive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. We're good. Thank you, Matt, for coming over. Thank you.
Thank you.